Parent functions. We're going to look at some basic functions. 6 of the most basic functions that we have. We're going to name these functions. We're going to graph the functions and show you what the equations look like for these functions. This is pretty important because for the rest of this unit, everything we do is going to refer back to these 6 parent functions. Okay, so let's take a look at what they are. First, we have one function that says y equals x. So this function is called a linear function. So we're going to write linear underneath the function. And the graph of this linear function is just a diagonal graph that goes through 0, 0 and crosses through like 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4. So it's just a diagonal graph that looks like this. Okay, next we have x squared. This is known as a quadratic function. So quadratic function. If we were to graph this one, so we're basically graphing the x squared. So that means we're going to cross at point 0, 0, and then at 1, 1, and then at 2, 4, negative 1, 1, and negative 2, 4, because 2 squared is 4, negative 2 squared is 4. And so these quadratic graphs are going to look kind of like U's. So there is the graph of our parent function of a quadratic. Alright, so next we have the square root of x. These are known as root functions. Okay, and if I were to, wow, that is not a straight line. Let's undo that. See if we can do better. Alright, so we have a root function. So to figure out, to help us with some main points, if you think about what's the square root of 0? Well, that's 0. What's the square root of 4? Well, that's 2, so I can go over 4 up 2. And then it's just kind of this small little curve-like graph right here. So there is my root function. Okay, so far for 3 out of our 6 parent functions, we have linear, quadratic, and root functions. Let's look at our other parent functions. Okay, so we have y equals the absolute value of x, and that is what the function is called, is an absolute value function. So absolute value. And then for the graph, alright, so if we plug in 1 for my x, the absolute value of 1 is 1. So I would have a dot here at 1, 1, then at 2, 2, and then at 3, 3, and 4, 4. If I plugged in negative 1, the absolute value of negative 1 is also 1. Absolute value of negative 2 is 2. So the graph would go this way. And so my absolute value graph looks like a V. Just like this. So there's the parent function called absolute value. Okay, next we have y equals x cubed as our next equation, as our next function. This is known as a cubic function. Okay, so if we're graphing these, just a couple main points. 0 cubed is 0, so that's just right at the intersection again. 1 cubed is 1, so if I go right 1, I'm going to go up 1. And negative 1 cubed is negative 1. So this is kind of what I call the snake graph. If you were to continue to plug in values, you would get a graph that kind of looks like a snake looking. So cubic graph is like a snake. And then our last graph, this is the same as y equals a to the x power. This is known as an exponential function because x is in the exponent. So if I were to graph this, and if we were to graph, if we were to plug in 0, anything to the 0 power is 1. So we're going to cross the y-axis right here at the 1. So it's going to be really flat, and then kind of start curving up at the 1, and then it just kind of takes off. That's what an exponential function looks like. So those are my 6 parent functions to review. So we got linear function, the equation is y equals x, and it's just a diagonal graph. The quadratic function is y equals x squared. It's a u-looking graph. And the root function, which is just the square root of x, and this is kind of just a small little curve. Then we have the absolute value function, which is like a v. This is y equals the absolute value of x. The cubic function, which is x cubed. It's kind of like my snake that snakes up and through these 3 points. And then the exponential function, which is a to the x power. X is inside the exponent. And that's the one that's kind of flat here, and then it just kind of takes off as soon as it gets past the 0 or the y-axis. So, there are our main parent functions. Your assignment will be to identify those and to graph those. So good luck, and if you have any questions, please let me know.